Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Humans of Herpetoculture, the inconsistently released show where I, Lucas, take a deep dive with other keepers who have far more knowledge and experience than I do in the world of herps. Today, I feel incredibly fortunate to be chatting with one of the most prolific and knowledgeable authors in all of herpetoculture. That's Dr. Justin Julander. Justin is well known for co-authoring The Complete Carpet Python with Nick Mutton, and he has also penned a myriad of other herpetological publications, including The Complete Children's Python, The Complete Knobtail Gecko, and a Green Tree Python book. Did I miss anything there?
Nope.
Okay, excellent. He produces some beautiful captive bred animals as well under the name Australian Addiction Reptiles. So Justin, thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
Yeah, happy to be here, Lucas. Doing great.
Excellent. Yeah, so I guess we'll just jump right in. How are things going in your reptile room over there in Utah, I believe, right?
Yeah. Good, as far as I can tell. So we moved last May, and okay. I built a new reptile room out in my garage, and it's about twice as big as my old one. So it's nice to have a little bit of room, and I've got a few new projects and things. So I guess I'll see very soon how, if the eggs start coming or if if they're not going to come this year. I don't know. They might take a year off, but I guess I'll find out pretty soon here. But it looks like a few females have ovulated, so I'm expecting something. Hopefully they're good eggs in a couple months. But
is this the first time that you've done like a major move with the entire collection since you've been kind of established with all this?
We haven't moved for the last 15 years. So yeah, for the last 15 years, it's been pretty consistent in one place and haven't moved them around. So moving's never a great thing for reptiles, but we only moved like a couple blocks away, so it wasn't a huge move.
Makes it a little easier.
Yeah, they did kind of hang out in the garage for a bit in early June, late May, so it was a little bit probably a little cooler than I'd like it to have been, but it's probably fine. They may have had a little cycle in the middle of the summer, but
sure.
So, it took a little bit to get everybody into the reptile room, get all the cage. I did like a thorough clean of all the cages before bringing them into the new room. And, yeah,
that can be really tricky. Like just even on a smaller scale for me, I really struggled moving like 15 animals. And then, so how did you go about doing that? Was it sort of all at once in a day, or did you kind of move maybe a couple setups at a time over a longer stretch, or what was your game plan to minimize the struggle?
Luckily, the family that we were buying the house from let us rent from them for a couple months, and so I was able to start on the reptile room and get the drywall up, get all the insulation in, all that kind of stuff. And so once we actually purchased the house, it was a little bit shorter than it would have been otherwise. Right. It was really a struggle if they wouldn't have let us do that. So that was really nice of them. And then once we had to vacate our old house, they were the last ones to go. So like the last weekend we had, I just moved everything over. We put them in the garage here, and it was warm enough. Like it was, late May, early June. So it was fairly warm, but not too hot. And then we had kind of some thunderstorms roll in and cool everything down a bit. But, it stayed mid 60s, mid 70s, somewhere around there. So they did get a little cool, but nothing too damaging or harmful. So
I know that you work with, the Brettles and the Inlands and some Aspidite stuff. Is there anything in your collection that might be specifically tricky with cool downs like that? Or was there anything you were most concerned about during that time?
Not especially. I mean, everything I have is pretty tough. Most of it comes from the desert, so it probably benefited from that. I don't know. I think we have this idea, that everything needs to be from 80 to 85 degrees, and if it gets any colder than that, and
they're just going to explode.
And, I remember a time we were driving around in northern Queensland. I was with Rico Walder and who was the other guy? Anyway, we were driving around and it was rainy and cold and we're like, we're not going to find anything. And, you turn a corner and there's a jungle carpet in the middle of the road. And it was probably 65 to 70 degrees, wet, miserable conditions, and the jungle's crossing the road, So it's kind of like, oh, maybe they don't need 80 to 85 or 80 to 90 degrees, constant
right.
temperature. So, these are pretty tough animals. They can handle a pretty wide range of conditions. So
absolutely. Yeah.
So I mean, we were fine. We didn't have any major issues.
Awesome. Yeah. How can you argue with the one that's actually existing where it's supposed to in the wild?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Cool. So yeah, just to kind of zoom out a little bit first, we all in this world know you best for your work with Australian pythons and your books. But your actual professional and academic life revolves more around a different subject, right? You study viruses. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So.
That's super cool and super relevant. So maybe just briefly, if you would, I'd love to hear a little bit about that side of your life,
Sure.
and how you have managed to kind of merge your passion for herpetoculture with the position that you've been able to achieve academically in other fields.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, from a kid on, I always wanted to be a herpetologist, right? That was always the dream. And then, maybe in retrospect, maybe I should have gone for that and just done the PhD in herpetology. But, I got to think, my wife got me thinking when I met her before she was my wife. She asked, what kind of jobs are there in herpetology? What kind of pay does a herpetologist get? And it's stuff I'd never thought of. I'm like, sure. I don't know. It's just what I'm going to be, And so I got to looking and it's like, the jobs were a little few and far between. They didn't pay that great. I'm thinking, maybe you're right. And then I got to think, do I want to be a herpetologist? Do I want to have to pickle things? I kind of like them alive. And, sure. And if I don't like to pickle things, I'll have to be out in the field and that will take me away from my family and things. And so I thought, maybe, I made a decision to keep it as a hobby rather than make it a career, for better or for worse. That was my choice. And so I knew I wanted to do something in the sciences. And so I looked into virology. Actually, my uncle, he started the group that I'm a member of now. And so he was getting ready to retire and he said, oh, you ought to come check out our group. So I went up there, met some of the faculty, looked at some of the research they were doing. I'm like, this is pretty cool. So I went up to Utah State for graduate school. And right as I finished, they had a spot open up. So I could stay here. I didn't have to move my collection across the country or, have to worry about a postdoc. So went straight to the big money,
That's awesome.
And then, so I work with different human disease causing viruses, alpha viruses and flaviviruses. So flaviviruses are things like yellow fever or dengue or Zika. Those are kind of the big ones that people would know about. Yeah.
Man, I miss the days when that was the scariest word, right?
Right. Yeah. That's the thing. I mean, we're about the only group of people that get excited about outbreaks. Right. More cool viruses to study and more funding. So, and then the alpha viruses are things like chikungunya, some arthritis causing viruses, and then other alpha viruses that cause encephalitis, like Venezuelan or Eastern equine encephalitis virus. So
that chikungunya one is the one they say it feels like your bones are breaking, right?
Yeah.
Is that one? No, that's great.
Yeah. So we try to be really careful not to get infected with those ourselves.
Have you, sorry, go ahead, please.
So our main focus is to identify and characterize different antiviral or vaccines to treat or prevent viral diseases. And we use different cell culture and animal models to study the viruses and ways to kill them.
There you go.
In a nutshell, that's what I do.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Have you ever encountered an opportunity to kind of dabble in the middle ground, which would be maybe viruses that live in herps.
So it was, over the last couple of years, we've been working with funding from actually a carpet fest.
Really?
They generated some funds at the Southeast Carpet Fest down at when they did the Carpet Fest at P.N. Cody's. And they raised a bunch of money for nidovirus research, and so they sent us some funding to look at potential therapies for the treatment of nidoviruses. So we've actually identified 4 or 5 different antiviral drugs that have activity against nidoviruses. And, we might look at them a little further, hopefully, to see if they could be used clinically to treat snakes. So this, I actually had an opportunity, or we were discussing an opportunity several years ago when they discovered some of the other snake viruses. What were they? They were some relatives of some arenaviruses, and it was probably 8 years ago, maybe a little longer, and I was, trying to figure out if we could do some animal models to try to do a proof of principle when proving Koch's postulate when you infect a snake with these viruses, purified and viruses, that it would cause the disease that we see in captivity or whatnot. And that never panned out, so I was really excited about this Carpet Fest funding.
That's awesome.
We were able to get a cell culture system that utilizes diamond python heart cells, and we got that from Dr. Oz, not the famous Dr. Oz, but the herpetologist Dr. Oz, Ozaboff, and he sent us some of those cells and viruses. Is actually Stephen. Oh, his last name's failing me, but anyway, he's doing some research as well. So they got that cell culture model all established, and he kind of gave us the different growth parameters and things for the viruses in the cells. And then we've been able to grow the cells and then treat them with drugs and show that, different drugs can reduce virus in the cells. So That's kind of the first step to identifying some treatments for snakes down the road. So hopefully that leads to something useful for herpetoculture, but we'll see. Right.
No, that's fascinating. And what a good example of the hobby finding a way to interact with the academic side. That's that's
and
awesome.
It's just different donors that participated in the raffles and things. So it made me really
so cool,
prideful of the the herpetoculturalists out there. That was really good. And the Carpet Fest, it works.
Definitely
a good way to raise money, and we've seen that time and time again. Raising money for USARK.
There it is.
Yes.
The first opportunity to plug USARK right now.
There we go. If you're not a contributor, contribute today.
100%.
Yeah.
And I was hoping to chat a little bit more about that later on too. So we'll circle back to the USARK stuff. While we're on this subject though, I'm wondering, of course, the way that COVID has impacted everything. I remember actually the first that I ever heard of it was my sister sending me an article at the end of 2019 that was saying new respiratory virus in China may have come from snakes. And she was like, my brother has snakes. Lucas, don't get any snakes from China. And I was like, okay, great. Thanks. And of course, now I think that is probably pretty clearly not the case. However, while we're on this subject, I'm wondering, because the public perception now, I think it's safe to say, is there's definitely a fear of zoonotic diseases from exotic animals, right? I think that is something that now exists a little bit more in the public consciousness. So from somebody with your expertise and knowledge's point of view, is there really any weight to that as it pertains to snakes specifically? Is there really any nasties that we know of yet in snakes that we actually do have a right to fear as people?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's some viruses that are known to be able to infect humans and to infect snakes, but they're mosquito-borne. At least the one I'm thinking of, Western equine encephalitis virus, has been found in various reptile species, various birds, various mammals. We're kind of a dead-end host, so we can get infected with Western equine encephalitis virus, but it doesn't really, we can't pass it on further. So if we get infected and a mosquito bites us, it's not going to have enough virus to transmit to another person. So where it's possible for a snake to get infected with that virus and maybe, overwinter the virus while it brumates, there's probably a very, very minuscule chance that you could get infected with Western equine encephalitis virus from a snake. And most, our biologies are so different between, mammals and reptiles, that a virus would be hard pressed to do well. Usually viruses are pretty host specific, and they do really well in certain type of hosts. With that example, with the Western equine encephalitis virus, small birds like sparrows and those kind of things are the amplifying hosts. So they're the ones who make a lot of virus and can cause that to kind of spread to humans or horses or snakes or whatever. And so we're kind of those dead end hosts, and we probably wouldn't make it to pass it further. I really can't think of a viral disease that would be passed from snakes to humans. Bacterial infections, there are some examples. Salmonella is probably the one that comes to mind most often. There's a few others that are possible, but for the most part, it's mostly a concern of whether or not it's going to spread to your collection and whether or not, certain snakes are going to get sick. And we've seen that firsthand with the nidoviruses.
Right.
Before we even knew there were nidoviruses, they were probably passaging from snake to snake through, poor husbandry techniques. And once we've identified them, then we can, maybe do something about that. But it's really hard when we don't have a treatment for them, so totally. You can know all you want to know about them. So right now, all we have is kind of good husbandry practices. The most encouraging thing, especially about nidoviruses, is it's not passed through the egg that we know of. And so if you hatch out a, healthy baby and you keep it in a clean space, you're not going to, get that nidovirus unless you expose it through, fomites your hands, tools you're using, a dead rodent that you tried at one snake and gave to another. As long as you have good, sound husbandry techniques, you can probably do a lot to avoid those kind of things or major blow up issues with those kind of things. Now, a snake having nidovirus does not necessarily mean a death sentence. There are likely some strains that are a little scarier than others, but I think that's still, there needs to be a lot of research into that to try to figure out, which ones are the nasty ones in which species. There's certain, viruses that only cause issues in boas or in, green tree pythons or things like that. So you do see some host specificity, between. Yeah. So, when you get to closely related things like a green tree and a carpet python, you might see some crossover, but you probably wouldn't see as much with like a boa and a carpet python or, some kind of further or more distantly related groups. So
gotcha. Very interesting. So that work is. Oh, sorry.
No, yeah, it's just good to know about them. But I think a lot of times we get really excited when we have a little bit of knowledge. We think we have the whole picture and everybody panics, and that's not the most healthy thing either. I think there's probably a lot of collections that have been culled that didn't need to be culled just because they had a nido-positive snake or something.
Right.
So we're still
you don't have to burn the whole house down. Per se,
for the most part.
Well, that's amazing. And so that work is ongoing. With the Nido stuff.
We've got plans to publish the data and things, and we'll make that all available to the, especially to the people who funded the work with the Southeast Carpet Fest. So anybody who's interested in that will hopefully, but science, not all science moves as rapidly as COVID vaccines. So
that's right.
We had to wait quite a while for the assay to be able to evaluate the compounds. And now we're in the midst of evaluating the compounds. So, once we have that data, we can combine it with the other data from other labs, and then hopefully have a nice publication here in another year or so, maybe less. It's hard to say.
Sure.
Yeah,
I'm still awesome.
On the virus side, I've been working on a publication with a group for over a year now, and it's really frustrating. Usually, it's maybe 5 or 6 months. If you can get some good data and publish it. But this company is just slow, so it just depends on the journal. It depends on your co-authors. It depends on a lot of things. Yeah, your
peer reviewers and whatnot. Yeah,
yeah, they could be a little fussy sometimes.
That is so cool. And what a unique perspective to have, being kind of an expert in viruses and also being really interested in snakes. That's amazing. I feel like we could talk for a long time about that, but in order to keep the train moving. So the next thing I was going to ask you was the Complete Carpet Python actually the first book that you've ever written ever in general? Was that your first published book? And what drove you to do that in the first place?
Yeah, I guess I had a chapter of a book in a virus publication, so that would probably be the first contribution to a book. But yeah, this would be the first book that I co-authored, it was an interesting process. Very you have some preconceived notions of how it's going to be, and it was a little different than I thought it might have been, but it went fairly well. So writing with Nick, he's pretty good to keep you on task, and so we kind of kept each other on task, and how many pages have you written today, and this kind of thing, kind of keep it going. So it was good as far as co-authors go. Nick is a great co-author to get things done. So it was a pleasure to write with him that book, and continue to write other books in the second edition now. So
yes, second edition. I of course have to ask, how is it going?
Yeah, you and a lot of other people.
Well, I'd get hung at the at the stake if I didn't ask.
That's the other thing too. The more people you involve in the process, and the more complicated it gets, and the more delays that occur. So we had hoped to have it last year, right? That was the goal, to have it by the end of last year. Now we're hoping to have it by the fall of this year, and we've kind of set a deadline for ourselves and those who are contributing to say, if it's not within the next month or so, it's not going in. We just got to finish this and get it out there. So I'd almost say we've have maybe 50 to 70% new material. Right. We've added a ton of new stuff to this book. It's not just a rehash of the old version. This is going to be almost a completely new book. One of our goals is to have all new pictures, or at least as many new pictures as we can fit in there. So we've got a lot of contributors, photographs, and we've also, added any up-to-date information from the scientific literature. We've added pages to the reproductive section. It's huge now, and a little unwieldy, but we're trying to include just things that weren't known or, new things, of course, and then just more kind of fleshed out some of the things that we'd put in before. So, there should be some really fun gems in there for people who are fans of carpets or just fans of, reptiles in general. So
I'm sure. And I know for a fact that there is a very large group of people that can't wait because we all, we're all talking. We're like, when's the book coming?
I'm definitely one of those.
Yeah. Well,
I want it to be done too.
It's going to be wonderful. I'm sure it has, but maybe speak to how the process has been different with making a second edition compared to just the first edition from scratch. Has it been challenging to decide what is, important enough to stay, what needs to be replaced, built upon, etc.? Has that been hard?
A little. It's funny, you go through and I don't know, by the time you have the finished product in your hand, you're kind of sick of it. You don't want to see it for a little while. And so, I hadn't, I picked it up time to time, but I hadn't really gone through it very, you figure, okay, we did all this work and I think the work was good. But of course, anything you do, you can improve on it. And so this is a nice opportunity to get back into it, see what we missed, what we could have written better, or what we could have been made more understandable, or what's new in regards to research that kind of gives us an insight on how these things are interrelated. And so I think, it's been a nice opportunity to kind of say, okay, I want a second chance at this, and I'm not sick of it anymore. It's been 10 years. And so I can look at it with fresh eyes. And sometimes you're like, oh, why did I put that in there? What is, what was I thinking? And I think, and then you hear kind of people in herpetoculture talk and some things that are pervasive through herpetoculture, like maximum size. You hear people talk, coastal carpets get up to 10 feet. And I went back and I was reading a paper that we'd cited in the first edition, but it gave like the average size of, 200 coastal carpets that were caught around Brisbane, where some of these really large ones are found.
Right.
But they're, probably 1 or 2% of the population are that big, and the rest are, 6 feet long. So you realize, okay, most coastal carpets are probably around 6 foot. They're not much bigger. And so when people have this maximum size in mind, coastal carpets, those are the ones that get 10 feet or 12 feet. And you're like, well, it's possible. It's just like a human can get 8 or 9 feet tall. It's not likely. It's possible, but most people aren't that big, and most people are between 5'5" and 6'2" or whatever. So that kind of thing. So, just different things like that you want to improve on and kind of maybe dispel some of the myths or misconceptions or things that just people have a little wrong, thinking about those things. So it's a good opportunity to hopefully correct some of our mistakes, hopefully add some really interesting new things. And I've had a couple epiphanies that I'm really excited about, and excited for people to read about and see what they think of some of the ideas we came up with the second edition, and kind of some exciting hypotheses or things like that. So
that's awesome. And I know you can't give too much away, but is there something in particular that you're most excited about people getting to see with the new book? Even if it's just a yes answer, but then you can't tell me.
Definitely. I'm really excited about some things that we're putting in there, and some of them revolve around some of the ideas on taxonomy and how things are interrelated, or where we might see splits. And there's some interesting things that have been published. They're out there in the published literature, but most people, either don't have access or can't get the full one without paying $30 or whatever for an article. So, it's nice to be able to have access to that and be able to digest it and put it in a form where people can easily understand it and kind of see. So, some of the figures and associated with the published literature and some other things, mixing in some non-herpetocultural or non-herpetological research into the mix. I think there's some fun things there. We're also in some of the latest research showed that Oenpelli pythons are part of the Morelia clade, and so we're including a chapter on Oenpelli pythons. So that's kind of fun as well. And there's not a ton of stuff known about Oenpelli. So, I'm sure somebody like Dr. Bedford could do a much better job. And I think he's planning on writing a book as well. So hopefully we'll see that. I'm really excited about that. But this will be at least a primer for, information on Oenpelli pythons.
Oh, I'm sure it's going to be great. And, I know a few people that are going to be really excited to see that may have actually touched a few of them. Those lucky,
I know.
What's.
Oh man,
Awesome.
I need to get back over there and say hello to Gavin, see his Oenpelli. So I'd like to do that same thing. But and see one in the wild. That would be amazing someday.
Well, speaking of that, Australia, the name of your company, Australian Addiction Reptiles. So that says it all, right? I mean, I think a lot of us can relate to that diagnosis. So how did that addiction come to be for you, if you can recall kind of how you caught that bug?
Yeah, I think some of the earliest recollections I have of Australian reptiles are probably, like most people, the frilled dragons. You see them in nature documentaries or in these reptile books. You see that big frill and that just crazy,
Dilophosaurus.
This was long before Jurassic Park, because it was that just was the epitome of a cool reptile. And then the monitor lizards, the parenti, and things like that. I've just always been fascinated with varanids and there's a lot of cool pythons, of course, in Australia. So my opinion, Australia just has all the cool reptiles. You get north of Australia into New Guinea and the Indonesia, and I just kind of lose interest. But if it's Australian, I'm all about it. And then since going over there, I've been over 5 times on various trips, and we had a sixth trip plan. My sixth trip over would have been last October if it weren't for COVID. So hopefully we'll get a redo on that one. I was going over with Eric and
Riley and Rob. Yeah. Oh man, that's brutal.
I was really bummed how that one didn't happen, but we did get to go to Texas. That was kind of plan B. And so that was fun to herp with those guys. They're great guys, just really a lot of fun to herp with. And they go, they're true herpers. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah, I'm excited to get back out with those guys sometime soon.
Absolutely.
But and seeing some of these things in the wild, just I want to see that more often, and I want that to remind me of my experience in the wild. So that's kind of my motivation around keeping reptiles has changed a little bit from, producing them or, making more and things like that to kind of reminding me of, what I saw in the wild and that experience and that excitement, and kind of, it really rejuvenates your excitement to keep. And
sure.
And I think, I don't know, I've always been fascinated with nature and just kind of watching, animals and move throughout their environment. And that's kind of my role in the writing of the Complete Carpet Python, is the natural history section. So in the species accounts where we talk about natural history or different things they do in the wild, that's what I've mainly contributed, and that's kind of the thing I'm most excited about in herpetoculture. So I've kind of lost my zeal for morphs for the most part.
Sure.
I work with a couple here and there, but mainly I just care about wild types and seeing what I saw in nature. So
when was your first trip over there to Australia?
It was in 2010, right when we were writing the carpet python book. My wife is the best. She's like, so we have 5 kids, and that's a lot of kids. And so, and that's a lot of money to pay for those kids. And so my wife said, the kids are getting older. They're going to start needing braces. Their school fees are going to go up and things like that. She said, you better get over to Australia while before things get too crazy with finances. And I think she thought it was a one and done. I don't think she thought I was going to feel the fire more. So,
right.
But she really encouraged me to go over there. And right at that same time, there was a symposium going on, and they had their carpet python speaker back out. And so one of the organizers of the symposium, I met him at a reptile show in Anaheim at the NARBC there a couple of years prior. And he's like, oh, if you're ever headed over to Australia, let me know, I'll show you, point you some places to go look for carpet pythons or whatever. Cause I told him we were working on a carpet python book. And so I contacted him. I said, oh, I'm headed over, me and my dad are going to take a trip over to Australia, and we're going to hit, the center. I wanted to go to Alice Springs. That's
for sure.
Most of my favorite stuff's kind of down in the center. And so he's like, oh, well, we just had our carpet python speaker back out of the symposium. If you want to come give a talk, we'll take you on a trip up to Cape York, and we'll go look for green tree pythons. And I'm like,
good deal.
Yeah. Yep. So they paid for that trip. I just had to come speak at their symposium, twist my arm. So we went up, I found a couple green tree pythons, and, had a great trip. I got to meet and herp with Rico Walder and Alan Rapace and a few other notable, herpetologists, herpetoculturalists. And it was a really great trip. And then my dad and I continued the trip and went out to Alice Springs and had a really nice trip there, despite it being the wettest year on record. We still saw a lot of cool stuff. So. Did
you track down a Brettles when you were there?
It was not in the cards.
Not conducive.
For that. Yeah. It was pretty. But I gave it a shot, and I got out there and looked, and so you hit on some, and you miss others, but that just gives me a reason to want to go back. So absolutely. I'm really itching to get back to the center again. I really like that area a lot. It's got just so many cool species.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. If I could drop myself anywhere in Australia, that's what I would hit first too.
Yeah.
So cool.
It seems like you kind of like a certain snake that comes from there, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. A couple of them. There's womas out there somewhere, right?
Oh yeah. I looked for those too. I didn't find any in Central Australia, but
they're a little trickier, right?
We found one in Western Australia.
Oh, did you?
I'll tell you what, Western Australia is amazing as well. I think as far as the number of species and how kind of there's a lot more habitat, more areas to search out there, and it's a little more or less developed. I guess Central Australia is not bad either, but sure. I just loved Western Australia. It's a great place to herp.
That's awesome. Those populations of womas on the west side too, those are the ones that are a little bit in rougher shape too, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right? Or is it specifically the southwestern population?
I think the southwest and the southeastern populations.
Okay. So it's more the southern.
Yeah. I think the womas are always kind of hard to find anyway, but I think there's certain areas where they're still kind of stronghold where you can find them in pretty good numbers. But if you're out there a lot, but if you're just passing through, and I think all herping has a little bit of luck tied to it as well. You can put yourself over there in the right place, the right time, and still miss what you're looking for. And it was kind of funny because the place that we did see the woma is well known for blackhead pythons, and we didn't see any black-headed pythons in that area. So I really wanted to see one in that area as well, but we missed out on those. But we found a woma, so I can't complain.
Right, not too bad.
Yeah, but. It was definitely a highlight. So then I guess I didn't realize how big of a deal it was, until you get back home and you post some pictures, and some of your Australian friends are like, I haven't seen a woma in the wild,
Ever. Yeah.
You go out and find one, you jerk. I think they use a little more colorful language than that, but
that is so cool. Yeah. And obviously we both were friends with Eric Burke. I love listening to him talk about the way that his trips to Australia have completely changed his mindset, right, as a keeper, and kind of what he's tuned into, what he cares about. Do you feel like that also applies to your trajectory with this? I'm not sure what exactly you were keeping and working with before you went over, but did you feel similarly in that way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, being in the habitat and kind of seeing the animals and they're doing their natural thing, and it definitely gives you an extra layer of what these animals need. And I definitely think it helps you keep them better in captivity. You think about some of the important aspects of their natural environment. So yeah, I would definitely think, and like I said, with that, finding that jungle carpet and the Atherton tablelands and how cold it was, you think, okay, maybe I'm keeping everything too hot. Maybe I need to chill them out, at night or whatever. And so, and again, I talked about the maximum size, before, right. and a lot of times we look at the maximum temperature as well. We think about, okay, I look at the temperature graphs in Australia and I see, the high is 120, and so, they should be able to handle 120. Well, if you go over there, you're not finding them in the midday out in the sun.
They're not going to be sunbathing. Yeah.
But a monitor might be. And so if you're, and I think that's that revolution in monitor keeping that was done, by Frank Reedes and some of the other guys, went out to Australia, saw these monitors basking and the rock they were sitting on. The rock's 120 degrees. So like, okay, maybe these guys do need 120 degree basking temperature, whereas I'm finding carpets at night and when it's raining, and so maybe they do need 70 degrees at night from time to time, or lower, and or maybe I need to rain on them once in a while, or something.
Sure.
Like so, I remember listening to Terry Phillips. He's a great friend. He's very keyed into reptiles and what they need. And he said, I have prairie rattlesnakes in my backyard, and they get dumped on with 10 feet of snow in the winter, but I'm not dumping snow into their cage. Do they need the snow? No, they don't need the snow. Do they need the rain? I don't know. Probably not, And so I think that's kind of the challenge, is to identify the things that are important for the animals, not just the things that they endure. Maybe it does 140 degrees, but they're getting as far away from that 140 degrees as they can. They're down below the Earth's surface or something in a cave or near a stream or something like that to avoid that. And so, we need to, the more you put yourself out there, the more you see how these animals adapt and survive in their environment. And I think I can attribute a lot of this to my dad. He would take me out backpacking, and he knew I liked the desert. He knew I liked reptiles, so he'd take me out to the deserts of southern Utah, and so I could be out and see the animals and see kind of where they were and what kind of things they were choosing. And so it really helped me gain an understanding and fascination. So, and when I'm out there and I find a reptile, a lot of times, especially when you're in a place where you've never been, your first inclination is to grab it and hold it and get a picture with it or something. But I kind of try to resist that and just kind of watch them. Of course, I think taking a picture first is probably a good idea. So
in case it does the quick scurry and you're like, no, I swear I saw it.
Yeah. But the best is if you can see them from a distance and just sit and watch them. I remember seeing a Pilbara rock monitor near in Carragini National, maybe it was in Millstream, Chichester, but I sat and watched it, walk around on the rocks and just kind of jump from rock to rock, and I followed the thing, and it was pretty blazing hot out there, and I'm sweating and trying to chase this thing, and it's just cruising over these rocks like nothing, jumping from rock to rock. So, but I can video it from a distance or take pictures from a distance, and I can sit and watch it do its thing, and hunt and look for food and stuff. So, I think you can learn a lot more if you resist the urge to grab and you get out some binoculars or a video camera or your long lens and just observe their behavior. But of course, I've grabbed my fair share and wanker shots and things like that. But, as they're called.
That's a great point. If the objective is to kind of experience the natural environment, then it totally makes sense to give the animal a moment to be itself before disturbing it. Right. Yeah. And kind of get a glimpse into its world before it glimpses you.
Exactly. And I think, for I kind of chided Eric and Rob and Owen and Keith, like, why didn't you crawl up that tree and get that Owen Pelly down? Like, I would have been up that tree, but maybe it's better to just sit and watch and see what it does. Watch it from a distance, watch it do its thing. Maybe they could have watched it catch a bat or something if they.
How cool would that have been?
They're long enough. Yeah, you see some cool stuff. So, that's. It's kind of hard because we're so excited about them and we're used to pulling them out of a cage and holding them and showing them off and stuff. But what could we learn if we just sat and watched?
Absolutely.
Watch first, grab second. But and I think the more, I go over and the more opportunities I have to see certain species, the less inclined I am to hurry and grab them or chase them or whatever. I can kind of hang back and watch and see if I can observe what they do rather than see them react to me grabbing them.
No, I love that. And just from looking at your Facebook feed, it looks like you've been doing a fair bit of birding as well, right? So maybe that even extends to the avian stuff for you these days. Oh,
I think it applies to all. I love to just watch all animals, and birds are easy because it's really hard to grab them.
You're not going to get them,
catch them. And so just observing them and, I just got a new camera and I'm really excited because it's a great, zoom lens and takes some pretty nice shots. So I'm excited to play with that. But I enjoy birding. Admitting that I enjoy birding is kind of taboo among a lot of reptile. Oh,
well, that's silly. I love birding too. You're in a safe space here.
That's appreciated. I see some of my Australian friends that are getting into birding. Well, John Weigel is a great example. He's the king birder over here. He broke the big year record in Australia, and then he broke it in the United States. So he's the man when it comes to birding.
That is awesome.
So, but I think a lot of his friends are like, oh, he left reptiles and went after birds, the traitor. So I try to make sure I don't say it too loud when I'm around many reptile people. I don't want to get beat up or anything.
Oh man. Well, I don't know. I think if somebody can't appreciate how freaking cool a hawk is, what are you doing?
And it's
they're
been
just
a lot
reptiles
of fun.
with feathers, kind of.
I guess, we're all kind of ignorant in different ways. And, sometimes we mock people, we have those little memes that show, here's what, people call this, this snake, and they call it all these different things, and here, a herper calls it a cottonmouth or by the scientific name, Agkistrodon or whatever. And I think that's been a realization for me that how many different species and types of birds are just in my neighborhood. I've racked up this year so far about 116 different species of bird, most of them I didn't even know existed in my area that I could watch them. And I'm having a lot of fun watching them. The reptiles are asleep anyway, so what else?
Yeah, exactly. Do, and some of those have probably, correct me if I'm wrong, but some of them probably come quite a long way to be in your backyard too. The migratory patterns can be just absolutely fascinating how far some of these birds go.
Yeah, they're incredible. We were in St. George down in the southwest corner of the state, and there's a spot down there where 3 different deserts converge, and so you've got 3 different habitat types, almost very close proximity to each other, so you get all these different species that you don't get in the rest of the state. And so we were down there watching a bunch of things, and they had some hummingbirds that were, and I remember watching a nature documentary, and all of a sudden I see this hummingbird go straight up in the air, and he comes just diving down like a peregrine falcon or something, and at the last minute he kind of pulls up right in front of this female, and he spreads spreads his tail feathers and it makes this whistle chirp thing.
Oh, nice.
And science, I remembered, I had remembered watching that on a documentary about hummingbirds, and now I'm seeing it in real life, and I'm like, whoa. And, I looked it up and I'm like, yeah, that's the species that does it, the one I was seeing. And so, just cool natural history stuff. And, it sounds like they're vocalizing when they hit the bottom, but the scientists demonstrated that if they clipped their tail feathers, they couldn't make the noise. And so, and then they showed, like, if you hold it, in the wind tunnel, it makes the noise. And so they showed that their feathers, the way they hold them as they hit the bottom, they fan out their tail and it makes that sound. So
that is
kind of a cool thing. Yeah. And then I see it in real life and I'm like, oh, that's awesome.
That sexual selection for crazy courtship stuff in birds is just nuts. And we don't really see it to the same degree in a lot of reptiles. The elaborate displays, it certainly is out there, but maybe less so. So that's awesome. Love that. Yeah. So, with all that in mind, right? I mean, such a rich list of experiences you've been able to have in Australia and whatnot with these animals. So with that, where you're at now, what are some of the things that you're working on here at your home? Not here, there, your home, not my home, that still really excites you? Like, what are some of the things that are still passion evoking with your collection after doing so much, seeing so much? What are some of those things that you have still goals to achieve in the future with reptiles?
Well, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of a sucker for anything I've had. Like I have a very hard time letting things go, and especially if I've raised it up from a hatchling or something, I tend to hold on to stuff and kind of, I don't like selling my old projects. So I've got a pair of children's pythons that hatched out in 1997.
Oh my goodness!
They haven't bred in a number of years, and they're all 1 year
younger than me.
they look really a little bit haggard and beat up, but they're still kicking. They still do all right. And so I just like them. Regardless of whether or not they're producing offspring for me.
Sure.
And, I guess I'd have to say pretty much anything I've kept in the past, I'm still excited about. And I'm still, excited to learn more, to see more. And, I kind of took a little bit of a break from carpet pythons for a while when the floodgates opened from Europe and all these different morphs and things are coming in from Europe. I kind of focused more on Antaresia, and I'm still really geeked out and excited by Antaresia. So that's been one of my focal points. But lately I've been getting into lizards. So get into some legged reptiles.
Well, I was going to say when you were talking about how you first caught the Australia bug, the first things you mentioned were lizards and monitors. So I was going to ask if you were keeping any legged creatures.
Yeah. I've got a couple species, the northern and the western blue-tongued skinks. I've got some tree skinks, Gurneus triolata. I'm actually picking up some Gurneus depressa soon, some of the spiny-tailed skinks. And a couple, I've got some Rankin's dragons, the little Rankin's dragons project, and a few species of knobtail gecko. And I've got a pair of Ackies.
Okay. Sweet.
Acanthurus monitors that are, I keep realizing that I don't have time for monitors. Like I'm not great at keeping monitors. I'm just so busy, and they don't do as well as they probably could do for somebody, but I really enjoy keeping them and watching them. So I keep getting some, and then I'll get rid of them, and then I'll get them again, just they're so fun to watch. But I think, I would like to get a different species of. I want to get some Gillani, some Varanus Gillani, which are the pygmy mulga monitors.
Okay,
they're very cool. They're like, but they're smaller. I can probably do them justice with the housing, but I think on the other side, I'm really excited about the space I have now, and I'm trying to get everything I do have bigger caging and try to get them into more, larger caging that looks kind of like where they come from, fake rock and stuff like that. Try to get some more naturalistic things for them. So
better for both parties, right? I mean,
exactly.
You get to enjoy the behaviors more, and that's great.
So that's kind of a focus as of late, is to get them better enclosures.
Very cool. Awesome. So one of the things, and when I think of reptiles that I associate with you, and maybe this is because one of my first introductions to you was finding your inland carpet video on YouTube, is inland carpets. And so I know that you work with a few different lines of inlands, and I feel lucky that I finally got some in my hands recently, and I've really been falling in love with that subspecies. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about them, maybe if you have a favorite of the lines, and kind of what you're doing with them.
Yeah. No, I'm really excited. And this year I'm hoping is going to be a really good year for inlands here. I imported a pair of inlands from Europe several years ago, and they produced some really nice offspring. And this is the second year I've tried breeding the offspring. So, and they were my, holdbacks, and really nice, have that blue gray color. I'm kind of shooting to refine that blues in their gray coloration, and have a more sharp pattern and things to them. So this will be the year that I hopefully produce from those. I did get some eggs last year, but they were a little hot when they were laid, and so the female was a little hot while she was gravid, so they didn't hatch out, and so hopefully I've remedied that this year, and they'll do much better. But
awesome.
I really enjoy the inlands. They're one of those species that is just the most calm, laid back carpet python you can find. My kids go in, that's the one they always want to hold. I never have to worry about them getting bit,
Right.
I mean, they do have a feed response, but once you get past that, they're really easy going.
They're so striking. There's just something about them in person that I didn't experience from pictures. Right? Getting them here was a totally different deal. Kind of the elongated snout, and they're really cool.
Oh yeah, they're fantastic, and I really like their kind of subtle coloration, and the fact that they can survive really well in the desert. I really like desert animals, and they're usually tougher in captivity as well. So I've had a lot of fun with them, and hopefully I can offer some refined projects here. I'll probably hold some back from if I produce some this year, so I can continue that refinement and try to get some that are really stellar examples. There could be a lot of cool things that could come from line breeding inlands. Absolutely.
And that clutch, those clutches that you're hoping for, are those the ones that you refer to as the AAR line?
Yeah, that's very correct. Cool. Yeah.
Awesome.
So I did produce quite a few Maug inlands over the years, but I'm focusing more on the AAR line.
Sweet.
So I can, I guess, call them AAR line. The male that you sired those was unrelated to any other lines in the U.S. And so that's kind of why I gave them that name. So the
that's
female
invaluable.
The female that produced them was a Harris Schofield. Schofield. Yeah. Schofield line. So that's where the female came from, but then the male was unrelated. So
very cool.
Kind of
awesome.
a nice.
Fingers crossed. And,
definitely
sign me up. So
fingers and toes crossed over here.
As an academic, if you will, as somebody in that world, and someone who has had such a positive impact on the reptile hobby through your books and whatnot over the years, I'm curious what your view our perspective is on the recent spike that we've been seeing in the legislation, which seeks to ban or limit ways in which people can work with reptiles in captivity. Maybe just kind of your take on that, any insights and what you see as the best way forward, perhaps for people like myself that keeps as a hobbyist.
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's one thing that really threatens our ability to keep some of these things. And I don't know. I mean, there's always an overreaction whenever there's a minor incident. There's always an overreaction. So it's really hard. I think a lot of ideas are, we need to police ourselves better. And I would agree with that to some extent. There's some exemplary groups like falconry that really do well to police themselves and kind of have requirements to be able to keep and be involved with falconry in the first place. It's tricky though, because we have such a diverse array of reptiles and amphibians that people like. There's just people are varied from wanting, being the bearded dragon mama or the, hardcore turtle and tortoise keepers or, python fans. And a lot of times they're kind of separate groups. And, some groups are a little more, give us a little more of a black eye than others.
Sure.
And some groups are just that hard that way because, like venomous, where it attracts a certain type of machismo person or professionalism. If you got a professional person doing hots, then it's really kind of a boring thing,
Right.
Phil Wolf or somebody, he's doing those videos that make it look kind of, wow, that's not that exciting. He's just picking up a snake with a stick or something. So I think, but I've always been of the opinion, like, why is some politician telling me what I can or can't keep? And I mean, to some extent, a society needs laws and rules and, we need to, and I don't really think that everybody should keep a reticulated python or a Komodo dragon or whatever. We just don't most people don't have the capabilities to keep those properly and happily. And so 100%. It's really hard because, when I was a kid, one of the first big pets I got was a Burmese python, because they were cheap and they were available and pretty much every pet store had one and it was cool. It was a big snake and I always liked big snakes. I thought they were really neat, and having one made me realize I like big snakes, but I don't want to keep big snakes. Right. I like little pythons are much more conducive, much easier to keep, and they display a lot of the same behaviors as the big ones. So that's kind of what drove me there. But there's some people who just have a passion for large pythons. Now, whether or not they should mass produce them and sell them to, whoever has $150 is another question. And so that's kind of where we need to maybe draw some lines, but it gets really difficult. It's just so complex. And when they make these sweeping bans and say, you can't keep anything over a certain size or whatnot, it's just not, there's not a lot of thought to it, or banning species that aren't even in the trade anyway. It's like, what is the point of that? So things politicians do don't make a lot of sense, but especially to us who know the animals. But I think unfortunately, they make a lot of sense to people who see reptile keepers only from like Animal Planet, where it's the sensationalism, where you got, just these morons going out getting bit by giant snakes or whatever. Right. And it's like, oh, that's what they all do. That, snakes just love to bite people. And it does such a disservice to our industry. And, I don't know how we get past that. I mean, I think the most important thing we can do is support things like USARK and some. Stretch out my shirt again. Make sure we. Yeah. Dang it! I should have worn mine. Support USARK because they're the ones who are fighting those legal battles for us. And if that's the least you can do, that's definitely going to be a good step in the right direction. So, become a member, donate, do all these things.
It's too small. It says US Arc. I tried. Yeah.
So that's definitely about the easiest thing we can do is support US Arc, because they're supporting our rights to be able to keep these animals. And I've heard a lot of good ways to do that. Maybe add on an additional $10 to the price of your snakes, and donate that money, or donate a certain portion of the money you make from selling reptiles to be able to keep those over the long term. But a lot of these things kind of play on the fears of people. And so as we educate other people, then we can hopefully allay those fears and help people understand that snakes aren't out to get them. They're not chasing them. They're not. And there's so many, misconceptions in the hobby. And when we make YouTube videos of us getting bit or us, being scared of the snakes we keep in our captive collections, or handling them improperly, or, all these kind of things that people do,
playing upon that sensationalism.
I mean, people, that's why people will click on those things, because they have kind of that fear, interest, whatever you want to call it. And so they'll click on that to see, that guy's going to get bit by a snake, or, and I love Steve Irwin and the idea of conservation and stuff, but I really think he introduced that sensationalism into reptiles. And then the people who followed him have done a worse job of, being more sensational, or trying to be like him in the sensational way. But and I just think that's
a really good point. I haven't heard that said, but you're completely right. And maybe
I'm sure I'll get a lot of hate mail, because
nobody said
so many people love Steve Irwin, and I love Steve Irwin. I hung out with his dad. He's
really.
Yeah, Bob. we ate dinner over at his house, and
that's incredible.
when we released some coastal carpets on his property, so
that's amazing.
Really cool. And he had that passion for the wildlife and stuff. Yeah. But
I love Steve too. Don't get me wrong, but just hearing you say that, it's very true. And I think what the problem really is that nobody is ever going to be him again.
Yeah.
And trying to do so in the way that we see maybe on popular YouTube channels these days, it seems to be resulting in a lot of unsavory consequences for everybody else.
Well, and we are in an entertainment culture. We want everything to entertain us. We want to see somebody get bit by a snake. We want to see a celebrity couple break up or fight on live TV or something. Right. It's just our human nature. And I think I think it's definitely degrading to our culture. I think when we focus on those kind of entertainment, and it's like Rome, we're a step away from gladiators killing each other for entertainment purposes, or tigers eating people, or people killing tigers in an arena. I mean, I don't understand why that's a thing. I've always been kind of bothered by that. So I'm more in league with the naturalists like Harry Butler, who frankly could kind of put you to sleep sometimes, because they just go out in the field. I mean, the guy puts his hat over a tiger snake, and then he'll pick it up and show you. He just like pins it with his hat. I'm like, holy crap, this guy's.
Where's the dancing around? But
there's no sensationalism. It's just like a matter of fact. Oh, I picked up a snake. Now you can see its fangs. It's venomous, but look how beautiful it is. And here, we'll let it go and watch it crawl off, or what. It's like,
that's awesome.
Just so low key, but he's educational and shows that they're not trying to chase you or kill you. There's no danger involved as long as you're doing things safely and responsibly. It's that's the kind of nature documentaries I like. But then again, I try to make my YouTube videos like that, where I just film the animals in their environment and maybe have a little bit of voice recording over it. But I don't get that many views because I'm not jumping on the snake. And then I've had people suggest that, like, why don't you get in there and handle the snake and show it on the camera and stuff? I'm like, everybody does that. I want to show these things doing what they do naturally, not what they do in response to me jumping on them, because we've seen it before. We know what they do, and it's not their best behavior, so I want to see their natural behaviors. So
I'm right there with you. And for what it's worth, I love your videos. So please continue to do so.
That's all I wanted to hear.
But I couldn't agree more.
Fishing for compliments here. No.
Wow.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you're saying, support USARK, educate rather than clickbait.
Entertain.
That kind of rhymes.
Yeah, there you go. That should be a shirt, right?
Yes. I'll pitch it to Owen and Riley and Eric today. But awesome. And on that note, let's admire some of these animals and maybe do even a little bit of educating and move on to the show and tell segment. So if you're joining us on YouTube, stay tuned here. If you're on a podcast platform, I'm going to go ahead and cut out this next section, but you can see it on my YouTube channel, Centralian Exotics. Let's do it.
All right. So I got some eggs from these guys. So these are the first eggs of the season. So I thought I'd bring them out. One egg looks like it was dud and it's kind of sinking in and not going the distance, but the other one looks pretty good. This is an Australian species, of course, from and so this is a Phyllorus Amnicola. They come from a very small range near Mount Elliot in Queensland. They're called a Riverine leaf-tail gecko. You can see that leaf tail. But they're very cryptic. They live on the boulders near the rivers. And so that's why they're referred to as riverine leaf-tail geckos. Really cool patterns and just beautiful coloration on these animals. So I got these when I went and spoke at the Gecko Symposium. I got them from Nathan Hall when I spoke at the Gecko Symposium and at the NARBC show in Chicago. Tinley Park. And so, this is the first year that they're old enough to breed and produce. So I was really excited to get some eggs from them, but really kind of a low maintenance species. I throw some roaches in a bowl and they don't eat a ton. Like they're pretty, they like it cooler. The eggs are just sitting on top of the cage to incubate. And so they don't need a lot of heat or, they like it cooler, like it a little bit moisture environment as well. So really, really fun species. I'm really having a good time with these. So, but
look at that tail.
Oh yeah.
That is so cool.
They're amazing. So they're not quite as cryptic as like the Madagascan leaf tails. But there's a lot of different cool, species of Australian leaf tails that aren't quite as cryptic, but are just as fascinating to watch and observe. They all kind of come from a very small range, at kind of the top of mountains. So they're
really okay.
They're kind of like, stranded almost, where as Australia continues to become more arid, they kind of get trapped on these mountaintops. So you have species with very small ranges, just
might as
mountain
well
ranges away
island.
from each other. Yeah, pretty much. And so it's kind of cool. And they're discovering new and really weird looking species. This one was actually split off from another species not too long ago. I'm not recalling the species they were split off from, but another similar species from a different mountain range. But the genetic work and the morphological analysis shows that they're different species. So
that is absolutely stunning, and
Phyllorus
primarily insectivorous.
Yeah. Yep. Wow. So, but I've found they do pretty well on roaches, crickets. They'll eat these insects, and I just leave a bowl with, a dozen or so in them, and they'll just pick them off, here and there. So
that is amazing.
Fill it up next week. But yeah, really fun. So,
oh, this is dangerous. I don't need to also like geckos.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I'll tell you what, like there's so many reptile species from around the world that I would love to keep. We all have to limit ourselves to
That's
some.
right.
Exactly. This is the next one I'll bring out, and this is one of my favorite species. This is one of the Antaresia. This is the Stimson's python. This is the western subspecies of Stimson python. So Antaresia stimsoni. This is the wheat belt locality of Stimson's python. And this is one that I produced that has quite a bit of striping. And so just kind of a different looking pattern. And it's, I don't know how well the colors are coming out, but she
looks pretty great on my end.
He's looking pretty good now. And so I held him back, and I have a female that's not quite as striped, but I'm kind of a sucker for stripes. So I thought I have to keep a hold of this one and one that's kind of looks a little stripy as well. So really, these are probably the most sought after of the Antaresia, the Western. These are kind of the pinnacle, in my opinion, anyway.
I can see why.
I love these guys. And I don't know if he's getting ready to shed or something, but he's thinking my
little
fingers
food response there.
I don't know if you can see those orange eyes on him. Really cool looking, really cool looking snakes. So.
Would you say the Stimsons are your favorite Antaresia?
That's hard because the pygmies are really cool as well, and the spotteds. There's some really
they're all cool.
But I
won't make you choose.
the Western Stimson, the wheat belts especially, and the pygmies are probably my favorite ones to keep, despite the headaches of getting their babies to eat rodents.
Right.
That's not the only downside, but hasn't been too bad this year. But
stunning.
Really cool snakes.
That is so cool.
I just get really excited about these guys. So the Western Stimson's python.
That section on the side where it kind of melts into the ventral and into the white is just really beautiful. The way the patterning fades like that.
They do have that just stark white belly. Not much, I don't think there's any patterning at all in there. And then it just kind of the white goes up onto the sides pretty well, especially in the striped animal. I think it's a little bigger area of white on the side, so kind of fun. Cool. So I'll be able to breed this guy and his the female who actually was from a different clutch. So, and I've been very successful with the Western Stimson's pythons. I think I know I've produced more than anybody in the U.S. Of these guys, up into the hundreds so far, I think. So,
wow.
I've done pretty well with them. They're a lot of fun. So
that's so cool.
I'll keep producing. I got a female that's gravid now that's looking like she's ready to explode. So should get a nice clutch from her. I was able to see them in the wild as well. I went up to in Western Australia in the wheat belt area, and it's called the wheat belt for a good reason. It's just covered with fields of wheat. And so these guys are actually found on little islands of rock that can't be plowed up and you can't grow wheat on them. And so they survive this natural habitat. But it was a little disheartening. We went there. One of my Australian friends from Western Australia took us up to some habitat where they could be found, and the first mile or so of the rocks, it was just trashed from unscrupulous herpers that had gone looking for these pythons and just turned the rocks and didn't put them back or
really?
Smashed them trying to get to the snakes and stuff. It was just like, really, I mean,
that's terrible.
It's really just not necessary, and they're not hard to breed. And so, you wouldn't need to collect all that many, but anytime you get a snake that looks that good, you got people just willing to do pretty crappy things to get those. So
people make bad decisions pretty regularly with pretty animals.
So we were able to find one. It took us the better part of the day to find it, and it was pretty much in the last rock that we were planning on looking under. And we were able to get it out, take a few pictures, and then release it under an even bigger rock. So nobody could get to it, But it was really a thrill to see one in the wild. And then after that experience, I was able to import some from Australia, or not from Australia, from Europe, where they'd been captive bred over there. So these are a couple generations since that. So it's
so cool.
Another project that's kind of long-term and fun.
Awesome.
All right. Let me grab another Western Australian endemic.
I like what you've done here.
You can tell at a glance what this one is. Yeah?
I think I like it.
So this is my male Western Western.
That's a big stimmy.
It's a big stimmy. This is a Western black-headed python.
Oh man.
And these are very, very cool snakes. But
now that's my crown jewel right there. I'll tell you what.
Mine too. I'm so happy to have these guys. I was able to pick up a pair from Ryan Young, and I've gotten eggs for the last few seasons from these guys, but I haven't been able to hatch them out yet, and it's killing me. I think my female is gravid again. She looks like she's ovulated, so I'm expecting some eggs in a couple months. But so when I first learned about black-headed pythons, they were like $10,000-$15,000 a pair, and this was back when I was a grad student or an undergrad student, so I didn't have that kind of money, and I'd always wanted to get some, but then I found out there were not only black-headed pythons, but there were Eastern and Western black-headed pythons, and so I was like, and then I really like the look of the Westerns, how contrasting, those dark black bands and the really pale cream background colors.
At least from what I've seen too, it seems like they really hold on to it well into adulthood, compared to some of the Eastern animals that kind of get a bit of a wash over them as they age.
Mm-hmm. These guys stay that and these guys are pretty, I think he produced them in 2003. Wow. So they're a little older, but, and you can see, I keep him a little lean. He's got a little bit of thinness to him, and keep him lean, mean.
That's the way to go for sure.
And, and a breeding machine, but they're not hard to get to lock up. It's just hatching those eggs that's been a challenge. And this last year I got the furthest I've gotten so far. And I realized I had a faulty thermostat on a bank of cages, and these guys were in that bank of cages. And so I think that might've been what was contributing to the bad eggs. And then the female's kind of, she doesn't like to wrap up her eggs, so she'll just kind of lay them around the cage, and that never helps either. The longer they sit out from outside the mother's coils, the worse they get. But last year I got 3 to go full term, and then they died in the egg. So I got kind of close. And so I switched up a few things in their husbandry this year that I think I got the male colder during the cooling period. And they locked up quite a few times. The female is right on schedule with her ovulation. So I'm hoping this is my year. So we'll see. I got some good advice from Casey Lazick the other day, and he's the one who originated this Western line. Right. So that's good advice. That's who to talk to, right? Yeah. But I don't know. I love that blackhead and the contrasting pattern of these guys. So very excited to be able to work with them. And if I never produce a baby, I'm still very excited to work with them. But I would like to give other people the opportunity to work with these. And I'd also like to hold back a pair, Absolutely. I'm always a little hesitant to get adult animals, and I got these guys as an older pair. So I'd like to try to raise up a pair that I produce. That would be fantastic. Yeah. Well, I will certainly be crossing all of the fingers and toes for that. Hopefully this is my year. So we'll see how it goes. I believe. such cool snakes. And, they're in the wild, they're mostly, reptile eaters, and they lack some of those labial heat pits, but they do have that rostral heat scale, heat pit kind of at the front of their face, underneath that rostral scale. So
this I learned very recently from Mr. Iper.
Yeah.
He sent me some pictures of that. Very cool. You know, I feel like a lot of folks didn't actually know that that's there, so it's cool. Mm-hmm. At least I didn't.
yeah. So they're and there's some, there's not a lot of research that's been done on these guys. Right. So there's been some cool stuff done on womas recently, which found them hunting bearded dragons up trees and stuff.
Yeah, and the Melissa Breton paper.
Yeah. She's done some good research, and tracking them underground and things like that. It's been really cool. So cool. Yeah.
They are my favorite. Unfortunately, if only they were $100 and nobody wanted them.
Yeah, I'd still have them if they were $100 and nobody wanted them, because I'd still want them.
Exactly.
These are. Obviously, I'm not making a lot of money off of these guys if I can't hatch them out. I'm losing money feeding them, but I'd keep them even if they cost me, a lot of money. So
right there with you. Oh yeah,
they're really cool snakes. So.
I finally added my first Western just recently, actually. So I'm
Western
so excited.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, I got a mail from Mr. Dan Vermelia.
Oh, he's great. Yeah, he produces some really nice animals.
He does.
He's a cool guy too. He's been over to Australia, has some really cool
I saw some of his pictures.
Yeah, he's found some good stuff. So I think he found a Centralian python like his first day, and
that's right.
Yeah.
Lucky
sucker. Yeah. Yep. I wish I could have repeated that luck, but
you'll get one next time.
I did see a pair of Ackies mating in the wild. That was kind of cool. Yeah.
Very good. But
wrote a little article for the is it BioWhack, the Monitor journal that it's an online publication, really cool information in there, but
sweet.
I did a little article for them one time after my trip, but
talk about valuable information from the field,
Yeah, exactly.
Reproduction is one of the hardest things to catch for a lot of these things.
Yeah. So it's kind of fun to see, but
awesome.
So that's my show and tell.
Thank you so much. That's absolutely phenomenal. Oh, that was great.
Yeah.
No, those are some incredible animals. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll bring back the podcast people now. Hello, podcast people.
Welcome back.
This has been incredible, and I could talk to you for many, many more hours, but I guess we'll hit the rapid fire because we're getting close to the 2-hour mark here.
All right.
Yeah, something like that. So let's do it. I will be asking a series of questions that I wanted to ask you, but I felt didn't warrant their own sections, and we'll try to hit on them as quickly as possible.
Okay, we'll see if I can come up with something. Some of these are,
and feel free to use the pass button at any time.
Yeah.
Okay,
we'll come back to it or something.
All right. So, what is one common reptile or snake misconception that is pervasive in the hobby that you particularly dislike that you would wish was corrected?
I think I kind of hit on this earlier, but the maximum size thing and the maximum, the hot temperatures that we keep our reptiles at for a lot of times. I think a lot of times we're missing their key natural history needs. And I think overfeeding and overheating is a big problem in herpetoculture.
Can put that on a shirt too. You did. There you go. Some rhyme. No, absolutely.
At least with some species. I mean, some species you need to overheat and overfeed to like monitors. You got to do that to breed them, right? So anyway, yeah.
Gotcha. No, I know what you mean though. There certainly seems to be a push to bake everything and make really big obese snakes.
Yep. Yeah, I'd like to see that go away.
Yes. All right. What is one species that you think is underrated in the hobby at the moment? Something that you think deserves a lot more attention than it currently gets?
I think stuff that's commonly imported. I think, and as we see with a lot of species, once those imports stop, all of a sudden they become hugely popular. So, and it's, of course it's hard to compete with the prices of imports, but I think if everybody just had a project where they picked some commonly available pet shop species that's not bred, but that's just imported, like a long-tailed grass lizard or I guess people are working with like tokay geckos and things, but oftentimes they do morphs and that kind of ruins things a little bit, because then you start, breeding with different populations or different species even. So I think if everybody kind of focused on something that's not really available in herpetoculture, there's so many cool species out there. And if everybody just kind of had a little side project with something. So the one I've chosen, and the one that I really get excited about, is the shovel-nosed snakes, Kyanactis annulata. And I'd like to start a project with those. I also picked up some Western ground snakes that I'm working with as well, trying to get those established and try my hand at them. They're insectivorous snakes, so they eat roaches and crickets. They're pretty easy to keep. That
is so cool. I'm
hoping, and they're just beautiful. I mean, the shovel-nosed snakes have the same pattern as a coral snake. They've got the red, white, and black, but the red touches the lighter colors, and they're amazing. So that's the one I'm focusing on now. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think they'd be hugely popular if somebody was, breeding them with regularity. So
I can't wait to hear how that goes. Yeah, for sure.
We'll see.
I love that. All right. So next, I know we love to focus on the positive, right? And that's so important to do, but sometimes we learn quite a bit from the negatives too. And with that being said, has there been a species that you have tried to work with that maybe has been your least favorite species to work with?
Least favorite. I don't know. I think sometimes if I've had a negative experience with a species, like you are less excited about them, and I had kind of a rough go with hognose snakes, and I think I'm missing something, and maybe I'm just trying to keep them in my python room, and that's not working well. So I just had a pair, and I bred them once, and all the eggs went bad except for one egg. I got one hatchling, little albino hognose snake, but the male and the female started getting these swellings around their cloaca. I'm not sure, some kind of abscess or something. I don't know what causes it, but I've heard it's kind of common in hognoses. So something I did wrong. I didn't keep them like they should have been kept. And so they had some issues. And so that kind of I didn't feel like I was doing right by them, and I was missing something. So, that's something that I probably shouldn't work with, and so I haven't really done much with those. I just have the baby I produced as a pet, and that's about it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But, lots of people are doing really well with them. So I probably should delve more into figuring out what the problem is. But at the same time, you can only keep so many species. So I've kind of focused,
For sure.
Had to focus. Like I said, there's a million different species I'd love to keep. And
we'd need a zoo.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right on. Okay.
Yep.
The classic question, if you could only keep one single species for the rest of your life, you can have as many of them as you want, whatever variety of them you want, but just the one. What would it be?
God, I think I'd have to go with jungle carpet pythons.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. There's just such a diversity of appearances and localities and looks. And I just love that yellow and black. And, as much as everybody says, oh, you'll never see an animal like that in the wild, there are, it might be a very low percentage, but we didn't get, these selectively bred animals to turn yellow and black by accident. I mean, that's in their genetics, and there are really striking wild individuals out there. I've seen pictures of them, they do exist, but just at a low frequency. And it's something you can get to come out pretty easily through selective breeding. So,
right.
They just don't selectively breed in the wild for color. They, breed for strength or whatever. I don't know.
Right.
They're whatever male's toughest, he'll pass on his genes, whether he's ugly or beautiful. They're not like birds showing off their colors.
Gotta love combat. Yeah.
So
Very
I think
cool.
I love jungles. That was the first python I got. As far as Australian pythons, I did have a Burmese when I was a kid, which I talked about. But the first breeding project that I had, as far as pythons go, and they have that special place in my heart still. So
that's great.
I really like the jungles,
and that's a good one too. Like you said, there's so many different ways you can go within that, with locality and stripes and blah 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 blah. So you'd still have some variety. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite individual animal in your collection? Something maybe with some sentimental value or something like that.
There's quite a few that hold that sentimental value. I do have a Russian tortoise that I got shortly after I got married, and we got it from a pet store. We actually got a different one, and it lasted like a couple weeks. It was one of those poor shape imports, and before I was still pretty stupid as far as herpetoculture went. And so she gave us another one that she'd had a long term, and it was already an adult and pretty good size, and she's still going strong. And it's 24 years later now, so she's probably quite old, but I really have a soft spot for that tortoise. She's really fun.
That's awesome. Now that is my age.
Yeah. Yep. But then she was an adult when I got her, so she's a little older than that. But yeah, I'm not sure how much older than that. But yeah,
so
really
cool.
Really fun. But I don't know. Pretty much all my animals, I just have that soft spot. Go out and look at each one, and kind of enjoy them. But
yeah. No, I love that. I think it's great that you truly embody that pet for life mentality, right? Rather than a lot of the kind of, this looks cool, and then 2 weeks later, that can be that can be a problem too if that becomes chronic. So, right on. What is something that current Justin wishes he could tell beginner keeper Justin? Maybe save yourself some headache. Or heartache. I don't know.
There's probably a lot of things that I could tell myself. Just one. I probably teach myself the trick of feeding Antaresia babies baby food, chicken baby food.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, tube feed them instead of trying to shove down legs or tails. It's a lot easier, a lot faster, and I haven't lost any baby Antaresia this year, maybe aside from one.
Nice.
But so knock on wood, it's working pretty well. Still need to get a lot of pygmies eating mice, but they're still growing and looking pretty robust on this baby food diet for now. That's the downside of breeding Antaresias. I've lost quite a few baby Antaresia.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, it's always not a fun thing to discover. Now, in the wild, they probably die off pretty quick as well. They get eaten. They're very small, so they get eaten by a lot of different things.
Sure.
So, but I do feel bad when I lose animals, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right on. That's a good one. Okay. So let's see if I can word this correctly. If there's one piece of knowledge or one question that you could be gifted the answer to by the gods or whatever you believe in regarding wild reptiles, what would that be? Something we don't know.
Yeah.
That you would love to know. I
would love to be able to watch a clutch of carpet python babies from hatching to, their first or second year, and just kind of see where they go and what they do, and, what they're eating and what percentage of food the items they're eating. We don't know a lot about baby snakes, especially, baby carpet pythons. So, and you just don't see them that often either.
Right.
You're going to see, subadults to adults, but you rarely come across juveniles. But we know there's got to be.
So the question is, where the heck are they?
Exactly. Yeah. So I would love to know what they're doing. That would be really cool.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Just kind of have yourself be a little camera following one around for a while.
Exactly. Yep. Have a radio tracker and a camera attached to them.
Right.
But yeah, where they're so small, that'd be a little tricky.
Yeah, they might be the one that didn't make it if we strapped a backpack to them.
Yep, you'd have your transmitter crapped out in an owl pellet or something. Yeah.
Right on. Awesome. Well, hey, that's actually all I had for rapid fire.
All right.
Awesome. That was so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me and sharing some incredible knowledge, stories, animals. This is great.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me, Lucas. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
All right. So
keep up the good work.
Thank you. Yeah. For the people watching here or listening, if they want to get in touch with you, see what you got going on, where's the best place for them to do that? They can
go to my website, australianaddiction.com. I've been a little, not too great at updating it, but I try to keep it some semblance of updated. And then they can message me on Facebook Messenger or and just on my name, Justin Julander, or through my Australian Addiction Reptiles Facebook page. So that's right, probably the best way.
Awesome. And yeah, if anybody has something, I will just say Justin is one of the nicest people that I have had the privilege of talking to in this hobby. So don't be afraid. He doesn't bite.
That's nice.
And you're definitely a big inspiration to me with what you do. And it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, everybody.
For doing this. All right.